Hey, what's up, everybody on YouTube? This is D from Brooklyn, and I thought I'd give you a little discussion about circulation and flow. So, come on, let's take a look.
From this moment on, you will now be known as Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh ha ha!
Welcome, brother Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh ha ha!
Enough with the Sharkbait.
Sharkbait! Ooh, well,
Now, one of the reasons I thought I'd discuss circulation and flow is because it's often not addressed in regards to freshwater and planted tanks and tropical tanks. We put a lot of emphasis on certain things in regards to keeping reef aquariums, but we really don't discuss them and how they pertain to freshwater aquariums. Many of the rivers, lakes, and streams where we get our fish from for the freshwater side of the hobby come from very fast moving environments. But yet, when we put them in our aquarium, we tend to kind of drastically change that situation in the way we aquascape our plants and set up our aquarium. So I thought I'd just discuss it. Now, for the saltwater side of the hobby, there are countless innovations when it comes to moving that water around. Everything from wave makers to tidal flows to, these JBO units. We have MP40s, MP60s. We have everything known to man for circulating water and currents. And there's a lot of study that goes into moving water in the saltwater hobby. And I think you'll agree that the animals, the coral, and the plants and fish do benefit from moving water. But do we always have to move this much water? And how come we don't put that sort of study into freshwater aquariums? Now, if you notice in this planted quarantine tank, or which has become more of a little rainforest tank, there's not a lot of circulation other than this internal power filter that I use. I do keep the surface of the water agitated for oxygen and gas exchange. A lot of the CO2 and everything in your water column will suspend in the top layer of the tank, which is why you'll find a lot of the tank inhabitants congregate toward the top of the tank where the oxygen exchange is a little better. But the plants, if you have the plants in your tank, they will actually grow into that water column as well. So we don't put a lot of study into wave makers for a planted tank, but it's something that I'll probably look into in the future, or if I am able to build something a little more custom and a little more larger for a planted aquarium. Now, as the plants grow and the fish come from areas which are more stagnant, like betas come from areas which are really stagnant, even pools of water, which you would not even believe they could live in, they become adaptive to these environments. And I think it's important that we try to facilitate them and keep them in an environment that they're more accustomed to in the wild. So for that reason, there is not a lot of movement in this tank other than when I clean out the filter. It becomes like a waterfall effect, but it really does not move the water around. The base layer of this tank is pretty much stagnant other than where the power head. It's hard to see because it's dark. My power filter, the Aqua Clear, pulls the water from this bottom section and draws it into the top layer where it's actually filtered by the plants, and the animals seem to gravitate into this section. Now, as far as plants, I've kept many species of plants. Some plants do better in this habitat. Some plants do not do better in this habitat. And I think my saltwater people will be able to relate a little bit more as to how many times they've had to move a coral or, or a specific piece in their aquarium just because the flow is either too strong or too weak, and those coral or inhabitants will not do well in those conditions. Like otocinclus and various types of catfish will really do well in slower moving water, because while they are long, streamlined bodied fish, they are really built for moving pretty slowly and attaching to the plants so that they can eat the algae and graze on the leaves of the plants without having to work too hard. Now, many people will argue, and I'm sure I'll get tons of comments on, D, your tank is like ridiculously overgrown, and I mean, how do you see your fish in there? But I used to clean this tank out every 2 weeks, and when I tell you I was throwing bags and bags of plants to the side, and I donating them to the club and things like that, I learned that when I was taking the plants out, the fish were actually less happy, especially these guys. They will sit on a plant like this guy right here. He will sit on that plant and go to sleep. He will literally sit on that plant and go to sleep. So I was like, wow, really, flow is probably way too strong for him. And he's actually colored up beautifully. Even these Danios will sit in the top section, but they will hover around this section. The catfish, they will definitely sit in this one area where it's kind of open, but they can sit on those big fat leaves, and he sits on it all the time. If maybe we can catch him now. And I always attributed it to the water changes, but it's actually the flow in the tank. Over here, where it's really densely planted, the water moves a lot more. I have oxygen pumping into this tank only because I didn't mention it before, but the plants by photosynthesis at night utilize a ton of oxygen. So it is oxygen running in this tank. It's not enough for you to really see it because I don't like the constant bubbling and disturbing of the surface. But flow, once again, flow. Look at how your tank grows when you aquascape, and take a good look at flow. And yeah, once again, yeah, I got water spots, buddy. You know how I wipe them? Like that. Nothing fancy. There you go. Water spot gone. Yay! But flow is a really integral part of aquariums. And as we get really advanced with the different types of pumps, I want to see how many of you have any J-Bows or wave makers on your freshwater tanks? I'd love to see them, because I thought it really odd that so much technology goes into the reef, but not a lot of technology other than maybe CO2 goes into planted tanks. And they both require similar conditions. I mean, some of these fish, I mean, you get fish like cichlids, they come from the Amazon, not these tetras, but Amazon. Some of those rivers are moving like during flood periods of the year. They move maybe 50 to 60 miles an hour, if not 100 miles an hour during the flood season. And we put them in tanks where there's like nothing but an air stone, and we expect them to do well. But your fish will tell you where they like to be. These guys hover in the root section, so I leave that root section for them to hover in. The neons also like to go in the dark period, and their colors have become brilliant. When this tank was open in my earlier videos, they weren't as pronounced. If you knew how dark this tank is at this section, and you look at how bright these neon tetras are, it's amazing. The difference between a dark tank in the fish coloration and a lit tank where the water is really moving. In this tank, also, you'll know the finnage is a lot shorter, whereas you have the water moving a lot. Betas will develop a different finnage. These guys are fat because they're always sitting around. Yeah, I called you fat. What do you want? There's one of my baby tetras for my thread fin, my little red fins. And once again, when I let the tank go dark for about 2 weeks, I let the tank get so overgrown with plants that the water was barely moving other than the air coming in and the trickle of the aqua clear. And guess what? I've been trying to breed these guys probably half my lifetime, and I could never get them to breed, and bam, when I leave them alone, baby fish. So that is my opinion on flow in the aquarium. Flow does two things. It moves water and aids in oxygen exchange. This is my flow of water, very slow, in the planted tank. This is the flow of water in a quarantine tank, where you do want oxygen exchange and you do want open water just in case you want to treat fish or you want to take them out. Or for breeding purposes, you want open areas where these little guys can get up and actually feed. This is flow on the reef, where these guys will actually grow into the tidal flow. and they will drop their little fragments off. When they grow comfortable and high into the water column, you'll see them branch off, and that'll become another frag. So flow is really more emphasized in the coral reef than it is in the planted tank, because a coral will tell you when it doesn't have enough flow. Then we have these guys in the beta pools here, which you'll see are minimized flow. I mean, there's no flow. Basically, change water. You get bubblers, aerators. These are my little rare babies, my rare betas. No flow, very slow moving water. But those are the conditions that they are used to. So I try to keep them comfortable and in something that they should be used to. Once again, you'll notice open area, different finnage. Look at the finnage on this guy. Another beta, different area, flow, bamboo, but open at the tops. And look at the finnage. Beautiful fish. So that's it from me, people. That's just my little 2 cents on water circulation and flow. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your opinion is. How do you move water in your aquarium? Is there something you'd like me to show you? Is there something that we should discuss? Shoot me a comment below, and I'd love to hear from you. So this is D signing off, talking about circulation in the aquariums. And until next time, I'm signing off. See ya!